Asana Lou, I'm wondering if you could talk now about your role as director of the Center for Minority Public Health at Case Western Reserve University Medical School and how it interfaces with the goals and objectives of the Case Western Reserve University Social Justice Institute, where you serve as a member of the leadership team.
Well, the Center for Minority Public Health was actually established. I was very fortunate. My former chair, Al Rem, and Nate Berger really had a vision with me of establishing the center. And that was true under subsequent deans as well. So I've been very fortunate in that regard. And health really, in many ways, reflects the disparities in our, we talk about health disparities, but I think it's important to recognize that what may statistically be a health disparity may or may not be of concern to to that particular community. And so the idea was really to work with the communities to identify what they saw as major health issues. And those health issues are very often reflective of inequities in our system, of structural inequities, of inequities based on perceived differences with race, religion, ethnicity, sexual orientation. And so the Center for Minority Public Health really takes a very utilizes a really broad definition of what constitutes a minority. It's sex, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, race, ethnicity, religion, immigration status as well. All of the work that we have done through research and service has really been focused on that. So, for instance, some of the studies that we've done through the Center for Minority Public Health included a 6-year study that was funded by the National Institute of Mental Health that looked at the cultural context of HIV risk among severely mentally ill Puerto Rican and Mexican women in northeastern Ohio and Southern California, San Diego County. And all of the women had diagnoses of depression, of schizophrenia, or of bipolar disorder. And mental illness in itself, or any kind of disability, we encompassed as part of our definition of minority as well. Some of the other studies have included, for instance, we looked at the association between HIV risk and particularly bipolar disorder among African American men who have sex with men. And then I'm a co-investigator on a study with a principal investigator out of the University of Illinois Chicago, and we're looking at HIV risk and HIV prevention among male Muslim migrants from Tajikistan to Moscow. So it's a very broad view of minority, but it all goes ultimately to the issue of social justice, of racism, of discrimination, of structural inequities.
And now, how do you address those particular populations? I mean, you're talking about international, the international scope. I mean, how do you do that? How do you go about doing that?
Well, we apply for grants. I have an incredibly hectic travel schedule. I also have a training program in collaboration that's through the Department of Bioethics at the medical school. That's in collaboration with colleagues in Romania, Russia, and Tajikistan to train professionals in the area of research ethics. Because again, we know that there are populations that are particularly vulnerable. The countries that we work in, at least at the time that we began training, and to some extent as well, now don't have as complete a capacity as they would like or as would be optimal in the area of research ethics to protect individuals who may be vulnerable in research. So it's through grants, it's through collaborations, it's with a lot of travel, a lot of work. I mean, same as everyone at the med school.
I just am interested in how you identified those particular places. Is that a lot of research on your part?
Well,
or how does that happen?
A lot of it is pretty serendipitous.
Really?
At least for me it has been, but it has really enriched everything that I do and hopefully who I am and how I move through the world. When I first came to Case Western, Victor Groza, who's a professor at MSAS at the School of Social Work here, had been doing research in Romania for quite a number of years around the issue of child welfare, because during the Ceausescu regime, birth control was illegal, abortions were illegal, and people who had children that had any kind of physical deformity or if they simply couldn't care for them because they had too many children, institutionalized them, believing that somehow the state would take care of them. So he was very involved in research around child welfare in these institutions. And at one point, he was interested in starting some research around HIV. And I had come to Case, and someone gave him my name, and he called me up and said, "Are you interested in working with me in Romania?" And that's how my connection with Romania started. And our initial study, I think, was looking at, I get which year was what, but our initial study was either looking at HIV risk and prevention with pregnant women, and then another year we did a study looking at HIV risk among street children. But I met colleagues in Romania, and they asked me to put in for a Fulbright, which I did, and I had a Fulbright to teach research ethics and do research in Romania. And which something that was quite unusual is they renewed the Fulbright for the following year because Romania said the work I was doing was a national priority. So I was incredibly fortunate. And my relationship with those colleagues has continued now for probably 16 of the 18 years that I've been at Case. And so that was how I became involved in Romania. And our initial training program included Uganda, and at the time Fred Robbins was alive, and he was supposed to speak at a conference in Uganda, and he was ill at the time and couldn't go, and he said, "You're going in my place." And I said, "I don't really think they want me in place of Fred Robbins." And he said, "Well, I'm telling them you're going in my place." So that was sort of my introduction to Uganda. And each of the different countries in which I've worked, it's been that kind of just, serendipitous. Now, if you ascribe to Jungian theory, Carl Jung, there really is no coincidence in life. So I just feel remarkably fortunate.
Oh my goodness. Well, I mean,
and another story that I think you will just love.
I'm sure.
When I was practicing law, I changed law firms, and I took 2 or 3 months off between law firms to travel around the world. And when I was in Kenya, I bought a very large spear to take. Now, these were the days before 9/11. I bought a very large spear to bring back to a friend in the United States who collected spears. Well, they allowed me to take the spear on the plane as long as I gave it to the pilot who put it in the cockpit.
Yes.
Well, when I got off the plane, the pilot didn't give me the spear, and so I was in Bombay. At the time it was Bombay, now it's Mumbai, and he took off somewhere with my spear in his plane. And so I had to show up at 7 o'clock in the morning to the Mumbai airport and wait for the guy the single person who had the key at customs to get my spear that had finally gotten to Mumbai from I think I was from Nairobi or Mombasa. So I was waiting for him, and while I was waiting for him, there was this man sitting next to me who was also on his way to Bangkok, which was my next stop on this trip. And we were talking, and it turned out that his girlfriend was a travel agent, so I got my spear. We were both on the same flight to Bangkok. He introduced me to his girlfriend, who set me up with a great tour, brought me home to meet his mother, who gave me breakfast. And at the time, he was a technician drawing blood at one of Bangkok's largest hospitals, and I was practicing law. Well, fast forward now, this would have been in 1982. Fast forward to 1984. 1994 when I came to Case Western. And I think in 1995 or 96, Karn Olness, who was a pediatrician and a researcher at Case at the time, was doing work in Laos. She still does work in Laos. And I wrote a proposal for university seed money to do an HIV-related project in Laos. And by that time, this gentleman, and we had corresponded through these years, had himself gone back to school and was now a hematologist at one of the hospitals in Bangkok. And so from this very brief meeting in a Bangkok airport, something like 15 years later, we collaborated on this HIV project in Laos after we had both changed careers, moved to different places. So it's remarkable. It's really remarkable. And we're still in touch.
And is this destiny, do you think? Or what do you think?
You know, I think life puts opportunities in front of us, and it's up to us to recognize them or not. You know, whether we're open to different possibilities or not.
And you are. Well, all of our goals and objectives of the Social Justice Institute, I mean, where are you finding, I also think, because I'm also a member of the leadership team and have heard you speak about some of the things that you've done, but never in the kind of detail you have today, for which I'm very appreciative. But I'm just wondering how you're doing a radio program.
I am.
Well, talk about that.
Well, the radio program is on WRUW. It's a live show on Tuesday nights from 10 to 11. It's 91.1. And it's really meant to be a public service show. And what we do is we take call-in questions. We take email questions. There is an email that I've set up for the radio station. It's straightupwithdocsana@gmail.com. And that's the name of the show, Straight Up with Docsana. All run together. And we run Docsana together. So it's DOCSANA. And nobody has called in yet, but we get some great questions by email. We get some great questions that are sort of slid under my door at the office. And the show is really for everybody, but our primary audience, we hope, are emerging adults from maybe the ages of 17 or 18 up to 29 or 30. And we focus on issues that are really of concern to them. So we've had 4 shows so far. We've talked about Chaz Bono's transition from female to male and issues around that with gender identity, sexual orientation, helping people to distinguish what is sex, what is gender role, what is sexual orientation. In last night's show, we started talking about anxiety and depression. We've gotten some questions and comments from folks who, the school year is starting soon. Students are coming back. They're starting to feel overwhelmed. People are concerned about mortgages, car payments, all kinds of things. So we started talking about that. And we're going to be having guest speakers throughout the year as well. So I'm very excited about that. And we find music that goes along with sort of the themes of the show and people's questions. And I am really pleased to be able to say that we actually have some international listeners. And this week we played a song that was specifically requested by one of our international listeners. And we know that we have some returning listeners because, for instance, this week we got questions from people who heard last week's show and said, I have a question based on what you talked about last week. So we're really excited about it.
That's very interesting. I really didn't know that was the range of WRUW.
It actually isn't, but people can access it. They can stream it through the web.
Yes.
When it's actually playing live, and each show is archived for a week.
That's right.
So they can download it if they miss the show.
Oh, that's how. Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I'm interested in knowing that, and that's how you're doing it.
Yeah.
Well, I applaud you on everything you've done, and also for being so generous with your life story.
Oh, well, thank you.
I think
thank you for the privilege of being here.
The privilege is really ours. And as I said earlier, I was looking forward very much to it because because I think of you as a colleague and working together as we are in Social Justice Institute, and I have been very impressed with what I've heard you say and about what you have done in those meetings. And I must say, you are just one of the sterling members of
Thank
of
you.
the leadership team. Thank you. Thank you very much, Sana.
Thank you.